the deer in the headlights moment happened. Now, I wanted to play, for those who didn't know, maybe you didn't see it. I see some of the callers and some of the comments saying, hey, I didn't even watch it. When he's talking about the school shooting moment, this was a odd, I guess you're going to call it a gaffe. But again, given an opportunity to fix it. So first I want you to see the moment in the debate. And then after that, I'm going to give you a follow-up of when pushed on it later on. So first, here is that moment in the debate.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it's only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it.
So, again, you'd think, okay, he said, I've become friends with school shooters. That's going to be a gaffe that everyone will remember forever because it's just probably the worst thing you could possibly say. Now, you would think, let's go in and clarify this. Clearly, he meant, I sat with Sandy Hook families. You'd hope, at least. I sat with Sandy Hook families. I have become friends with the school shooting victims' families. That's what you're hoping he really meant by that, and it was just a gaffe. But then pushed on it. This was later on, post-debate, last night. He was in a pizzeria at a pastry shop, and he was asked about it. And here was the answer.
What do you think your strongest moment was tonight?
I think it was a good debate. The public got to see a contrast. And I think the ending sums it up. The democracy issue is important.
Governor, you said you'd become friends with school shooters during the debate. Can you clarify what you meant on that?
Can you clarify what you meant when you said you'd be friends with school shooters?
And totally doesn't respond. Basically, just turns a blind eye like they did.
Yeah, I mean, Rick, that could have been it. That
question.
moment could have been said, of course I didn't say, that's not what I meant to say. And that would have been it, but yet he wouldn't.
Yeah.
I did not know that if I was kind of guessing the day before, that Tiananmen Square would be such a
that it would even come up. I wasn't aware even of this story, and it was the story of Tim Walz claiming to have been there during the events.
I mean, those would have been events to like, those are...
Yeah, you remember it, and it's also very clear. And it's one of those things where we know he's had a relationship, the way he talks about China, that he loves China and always is discussing China.
He went on his honeymoon to China.
Yeah, and then there was pushback, I guess, from...
That's weird, people. That's weird.
Whatever. I mean, people want to do what they
want. You want to go to communist China for your honeymoon?
I mean, no, I don't. I went
1980s?
I went the American way to Las Vegas, Nevada. That's where I went. But, I don't know if I'd make that decision again now either. Both of those, maybe not the best. I love you, Las Vegas, but I don't know.
Well, he's not communist.
It's true. It's the opposite, maybe. Now listen, though. He brought this up, and I guess Minnesota Public Radio pushed back and said, from what our digging has shown, you were not there during those events, that you did not show up until much later in the year. When they pushed him, if you missed it, here's the conversation.
My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just... That's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
I mean, kind of a Biden feeling moment.
Yeah,
it really had that sort of...
I don't even know where he was going with
It
that.
had that sort of we beat Medicare feeling at the end of it. It did have that...
we beat Medicare to death.
Yeah, it did have that vibe. Unfortunately, he couldn't really have a good answer for that. And that was like the shortened version we played for you. The real version, especially the initial part, it was a long, drawn-out story about how he grew up in a town of 400 people and the values, and then eventually it got itself around to that. Again, I appreciate the civility that came out of this. I appreciate some of the vulnerability. I think you had J.D. Vance coming out to be the most likable he's been in the entire run, because I think there was conversations of that. The point for Vance was to try to hammer home, or for Walz to Vance was to try to hammer home the whole Vance is weird. It's going to be weird. And I think it actually was the exact opposite. You had that moment where Tim Walz comes off as kind of, awkward, strange, has weird stories that don't add up.
Right.
And then you had JD coming off as a pretty likable, normal dude. Something that I don't think was expected. But of course, very well-educated guy, has been in these kind of debates probably before, and I think the experience was shown.
Yes, and I think Tim Walz thought, when you're on the left, you can make up a lot of these stories, and people don't fact-check you, except that when you get to this level of politics.
Right.
And they even the Democrats want to catch you lying. Even the Democrats want to catch you with a misstatement. And this bizarre statement that you're there for Tiananmen Square is just like I took fire with U.S. troops in Afghanistan. And Brian Williams paid the price for that.
Yep.
Will Tim Walz pay the price for this? We don't know at this point. I don't know if it's big enough to decide who people are going to vote for, because these are the VP candidates, and ultimately people usually vote for who's at the top of the table.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, he did say, hey, I misspoke on that. That is, I mean, but when really pushed, he finally came out against it. Look, there was another gaffe later on in the show we'll talk about. But there are some good calls coming in. I think we should go ahead and take one. Let's go to Jeanette, who's calling online too. Jeanette in California, you're on the air.
Hi. I noticed last night that Governor Walz, he didn't know that he was on split screen, and he was nodding his head in agreement to just about everything.
Well, Jeanette, I think
that
was I think that was on purpose.
I think it was, Jeanette, because actually, if you look at what they said, and you are right in this, maybe the big takeaway from this was Walz and with Vance saying, hey, we actually agree on a lot more than we disagree. When we disagree, I think the quote was somewhere like we're miles apart in terms of maybe the 2020 election, those kind of things. But when we agree, we actually can get some stuff done. There was some real human conversations there when it was, my son had witnessed or my daughter had witnessed a shooting. And then there was that conversation there where they actually had a moment of going, oh, that's so horrible. I can't believe that. And they had that kind of real, again, human moment. I just think, Jeanette, we're not used to seeing that anymore. Yeah. This is how the debates used to be. They were this, if you go back to a Romney, Obama, they were tough, but they weren't going to shake hands. You didn't get that vibe, that there was ever going to be this moment of
destroy.
Of let's just call each other names for 2 hours. Gotcha. That is really a moment that's changed in the last decade.
So you think it's Donald Trump?
I think it was probably Donald Trump, and then the Democrats decided we have to play by those rules, and where they wouldn't have before. And I think you can see that in the original Republican debates in 2016. 2016 original Republican debates for Republicans, it was like 5 guys playing by the rules and Trump going out there and saying stuff about Ted Cruz and saying stuff about Marco Rubio and really throwing like weird haymakers that no one expected, because it's just not how you play the game. Now, I think that's what attracted people to Donald Trump, because not how you played the game.
Haymakers that you can never forget.
Yeah, stuff that sticks with you forever. Now, I think you're like, okay, well, can we counter-program that? And I think they counter-programmed that because they knew with Harris and Trump, they had to do it. They had to play by the Trump's rules. You had to be a bit more hard-edged. You had to be a bit more insulting, if you will. But I think you had probably a breath of fresh air from a lot of people. Even I saw Democrats posting that was very nice to see at least some civility.
Yes.
And I do think that. I think in the highlight reel again that I watched this morning of it, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot this was largely nice. Even when they said you're lying, you're not, it didn't have that, disdain as a part of the conversation. Sure. And people may not like that. I think we had that call saying, he seemed like he was agreeing with him. And I think maybe that's the point, was to show that we're a little bit closer together than we are apart.
Definitely where Tim Walz would like to go. He would like to go and say, listen, you think we're so different from the Trump and the J.D. Vance guys? We're not. They just try to make it sound like we're so bad compared to. We're really, on a couple of issues we might disagree strongly, but on basically everything else we're the same. Yeah. And I think that's where they wanted people to go. They're trying to convince people that you don't have to vote for Donald Trump. You can still vote for us, and you're going to get about the same thing.
Yeah, the idea that, hey, you don't have to. Yeah.
And I think that, again, don't forget the debate between Harris and Trump, because that really did show the differences.
Well, and then Harris saying, remember, you don't have to leave your faith or whatever it is to vote for me. And look, you have a lot of the more left-leaning evangelicals saying, or even the ones who are more conservative who just hate Trump, saying you don't have to leave your faith to do that.